is almost political over there. I know in certain churches it can get that way here as well, but over there, if you walk into a room and say, yes, I'm a pastor, you get the same kind of respect that a government official might get here. So there's a strange hierarchy, and I know that especially in the Protestant direction of things, we don't use the term bishop very often. That's just what they call him there. But really, he's a pastor of a church who trains other pastors as well. And so right now he's got one young man who I really thought highly of. His name was Walter, that he's currently training, and at some point we'll send him off to be a pastor himself. But anyway, back in November, Boniface came here, and he was kind of in a pickle. And for those of you who aren't aware, my connection to Boniface would be these two folks here, Bruce and Mary Sievers. They were integral, Mary especially, back in 2008, was it? When Boniface started his church in Kenya. So back in 2008, they started ministry together. They planted that church in Kenya, and Boniface has moving forward ever since. And that guy has, we'll get into it, but he's got a lot of irons in the fire at this point. But earlier last year, probably September, October timeframe, they had their local elections, and their local elections brought in a new local governor, and he was not a Methodist, a Muslim. And because of his faith, that put a little extra heat on the local churches. And Boniface had at some point purchased a piece of land. I think that was in like 2012, and they had thrown up a temporary steel structure, and that's where they were holding church services. In the meantime, they help with an orphanage. They have several high school students that they sponsor for school. They have, he called it a free clinic. We'll talk a little bit about that, but they're administering vaccines and medication for different diseases going on over there, free of charge. And he has a village that he kind of looks after as well. So a lot of things going on. They haven't had the time or the money, really, to build a church. And so October, November of last year, he was here, and he said, hey, I have until the end of the year to put up a permanent structure, and it's going to cost about $52,000. And so I looked into him, I checked him out. He seemed like a pretty nice guy, and I said, you'd be welcome to come and present your ministry during one of our Sunday school hours or during one of our church services. And the people here are generous. I'm sure they will give. And I had an expectation of a certain amount, and that expectation was blown out of the water. Right here in Winfield, God worked a miracle, and in one Sunday, I think the number that we raised, I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it was whatever he had raised up until that point. It was whatever he had left to raise. It was over $40,000 in one day, in one offering. The folks here raised over $40,000 to finish the project out there. So he went home pretty much immediately. He straight away jumped on a plane and went home and started the project. We've had a couple of updates here and there. Since then, the building is 95% of the way done. There are a few other things here and there. I'll show you those to you, but a couple of things. But it was just an absolutely powerful miracle to see the Lord at work right here in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, to be able to help somebody that far away and to really see the gospel being preached, and now in a place that will be there for years and years to come. So since then, Boniface has called me about once a week and asked when I'm coming to Kenya. And for those of you who don't know anything about me, I went to South Africa the first 2 weeks of June. That was a trip that I had planned for a couple of years. And I said, hey man, I'm going to Africa in June. I can't go to Africa twice in the same calendar year. That's crazy. I can't do it. Well, we had planned a missions trip here that logistically didn't work out, and that freed up a week. And so I talked to the board and the missions team, and they were like, go to Africa. So we went to Africa a second time. So I'm tired. I've been on a lot of planes this year. But it was an absolutely amazing experience. It was really, really fun. So I've put together, just so you're aware, I think there's like 200 some odd slides here. which sounds like a lot, but understand that I spent probably 30 hours this week taking it down from about 6,000 to 200. So when I take pictures, it's accuracy by volume. I don't have time to sit there and get the perfect exact shot. I'm just going to snap away, and hopefully one of those 15 pictures is going to come out okay. Pat, I think, only took about 100 pictures, but all of his were good. I took about 2,000. So anyway, we've put together this. It's not in chronological order. I could have started like, here's what happened when we landed, and this is what our trip was. But instead what I did was I kind of split up each ministry that we were able to participate in. So just understand that as you're watching through this, it might not have been day by day what we did, but it hopefully gives a pretty good picture. It was a great experience for me. I was so excited to meet Boniface for real, spend some real time with him. I mean, I had only spent like an hour with him before, and other than that, just phone calls. So it was good to be able to fellowship with him and meet his family and spend time with members of the church there. It was just really, really exciting. I will say this. I told them the same thing my last day there. All weekend, they kept calling me and Pat missionaries. I've been called many things. That's not one of them. I'm not a missionary. That's not what God has called me to, especially not foreign missions. But they kept calling us missionaries, and they were so touched by the fact that some random people in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, would be willing to do something. And I said, you guys just have to understand it wasn't anything we did. It was 100% as miracle gets. I mean, it was a loaves and fishes situation. It was in no way, shape, or form anything that any one person did or anything like that. And I told them, I said, honestly, being there, my cup was filled. I wasn't ministering to people, I was being ministered to. And it was really powerful for me to see a completely different culture and experience a different way to worship God, and it was really, really awesome. Do you have anything to say, add to, or subtract from that?
Well, I was in Kenya in 2003, so it's been 20 years since I'd been there. And I love Kenya. And I told Josh about the smell of Kenya, and as soon as we hit the streets, you could smell the charcoal fires, the firewood, and it brought all that back from 2003. Like I said, I love the people. I love Kenya. But it is good to be home, for sure.
Pat's going back every year, he said. He said next time him and Kathy are going to go together, and it's going to be awesome.
It's the flights. I have claustrophobia, and I sat in a seat that was definitely too small for me. I don't know, they shrunk the seat, I swear. But the longer as hours went by, the plane got smaller and smaller. 14 to 16 hours is just an awful lot to be in that. And in South Africa, it would have been even longer, right?
It was about the same.
Oh, it was about the same. Yeah, it's a long
time. It is. I would recommend, and Boniface said this 100 times while we were over there. He said, any one of you that wants to go, they have a very comfortable house. They're not living in a mud hut. I'll show you their house in a minute. But they have a very comfortable house. They have indoor plumbing with hot water. They have electricity. They have internet. They have cable. So anybody who wants to go, once you get there, your comfort level is not something that you should be concerned with. However, the 16-hour plane ride to get there is something that you really got to prepare for.
And Hilda would take real good care of you.
Yeah, they will feed you until you are exploding. I don't eat much, especially when it's hot out, and it's hot because they're on the equator, and she just kept force-feeding me food. And
they're looking at me.
You know how here in America, at least growing up in the 90s, your parents would say there's starving children in Africa. I want you to understand that mothers in Africa say there's starving children down the road, so you have to eat everything that's on your plate. And I was like, can't we just take it to them? I can't eat anymore.
When we got a chicken, it was a whole chicken.
Yeah, yes,
and
so much food.
Josh, have another piece, and he says, well, you're the one that can have another piece.
Yeah.
In a mound of French fries.
Oh, man, bigger than any large fry I ever had from McDonald's, that's for sure. So, no, I would highly recommend to anybody who has any interest at all. to get on a plane and go over there, and he can put you up for as long as you want to be there, and you'll be ministered to just as much as you have the ability to minister to them. So just be in consideration of that. But this is obviously just us. If you follow us on Facebook, you've already seen a couple of these pictures. This was us kind of touching down, a little exhausted after, at this point, we had been traveling for about 26 hours, and then we still had about 4 hours worth of car ride to get to his house. So we were pretty exhausted at this point. But these are just a couple of pictures of kind of what the city looks like on your way through town or whatever. Nothing major special. This is something I found interesting. I know that's kind of small, especially for those of you in the back, but they just grazed their cattle on the side of the road. It is the most cool and bizarre thing, because I'd love to have cows, but in New Philly there's an ordinance that I can't have any farm animals. I can't have chickens, I can't have cattle. I got enough space for at least a goat, but I'm not allowed to have them. They just graze them right on the side of the highway. It's quite bizarre. And
That's what changed from 2003 to this year. Actually, it was somewhere they thought in about 2010. Motorcycles came about. Now, they've been around for a long time, but there was no motorcycles on the road. And this time, there were thousands of motorcycles on the road. And actually, the edge of the road is where the motorcycles basically hang at. But on that 4-hour ride, I'm not sure what he was doing, but the driver was scaring me to death. What would you say our top speed was?
Oh, we were definitely at different times, both trips. We were definitely over 100 miles an hour, for sure. Yeah.
On tires that I don't think you would drive to Walmart with.
Yeah.
There's
no traffic laws. There's no rules. It's just go and hope.
It's pass at your
my
own
kind
risk.
of driving, personally.
Pass at your own risk, and actually it's pass at the whole car's risk, because this guy is doing it. And a few times I did one of those whoa, or went to put on the brake, wasn't happening.
Yeah. So just some pictures of the city. Not a whole lot, but man, those motorcycles, they were all over the place. This is Boniface's house. So like I said, he's got a beautiful home. The way they ended up here, Boniface is not loaded, and what money he does have, he gives. I mean, he's one of the most giving individuals I think I've ever met. But there was a gentleman from the States who built this house and was linked up with Boniface during some level of ministry, and has since kind of said, you can have the house and I'm out, and doesn't contact him anymore, doesn't fellowship with him, just left. Didn't want anything else to do with Kenya. So left Boniface with this house. It was 5 bedrooms? Might have been 5 bedrooms. Each bedroom had its own bathroom, plenty of space, which is important because right now the way it's worked out is the high school students go to boarding school, and they're trying to make up a little bit of time from COVID, so they only get 1 month off a year. They don't get a summer break like we do. So that 1 month a year, or long weekends or whatever, the orphan kids that go to boarding school, Boniface and his wife host in their home. So they have a pile of kids that come and stay with them. And so it's a large house, which is great for having people like you and me come, but it's also great for being able to minister to the kids.
Africans love bright colors in general. And the green you see leads right into the living room that's green too. It's pretty bright.
Yeah. So this is the church that we raised the money for and built. It is hard to really wrap your mind around it, but I'll tell you, space-wise, square footage-wise, I would say it's every bit of 1/3, if not half, of what we have here as far as the facility is concerned. So it's pretty big. Now, obviously, our building is large, but for something over there, it's very good sized. I would say they could probably fit at least 300 people in their sanctuary, and if they really wanted to pack them in there, they could probably double that. I want to say the Sunday, a week ago today, service, they had at least 300 people packed in there. It was pretty powerful. So the next few slides is just kind of a walk-through tour of the facility. Understand, when we showed up there were already at least 100 people there. And so it was hard to just take pictures of a building. And so I waited until the day we were leaving, which was the day after the conference ended, to take pictures. So it's dirty. It's dirty because it was full of hundreds of people for 4 or 5 days straight. There's the banner there. Hopefully you saw that when you came in. It was the last thing I said to him on our way out. I said, "Hey, what are you going to do with that banner?" He said, "Well, we're going to keep it." I said, "Are you going to reuse it?" He said, "Well, no." I said, "Well, can I bring it home and hang it in my church and kind of continue the Thanksgiving conference for at least another week?" And so that's what's hanging out front, is that banner there.
Well, we found a ladder that was a home built. If I would have gotten on the ladder, it would have been a toasted ladder. Josh got on the ladder, and I was saying prayers as he's up there to get that thing off.
Yeah.
It was rather rickety ladder.
So this is the front door. Yeah, that is tile, and yes, when you put 2x4s on tile, it gets a little slick. So putting that banner up and taking it down was not OSHA approved, but this is kind of walking in the front door here, and then as you're looking, it'll be looking right to left. I kind of did a panoramic view. So this is right to left. That's the stage, and then that's just all the sanctuary. And then here is from the pulpit looking out.
Now, the garden chairs you see there, the plastic, they are not approved for me.
Pat had a throne. We'll see the throne
I
momentarily.
got a throne. They brought a swivel desk chair from downstairs, and I'm going, no. But that's what I got.
Yeah, so just keep this in mind, Church Decorating Committee, when it's time to update our seating, these little garden outdoor chairs, they work really effectively for church seating. They're lightweight. You can pick them up. You can move them easily. I'm just throwing it out there. That works well. There's a little storage closet that was locked, so I couldn't get in there and take pictures, but that's right off the right-hand side of the stage there, and then we go up the stairs, and upstairs there are 2 offices. This eventually will become just the pastor's office, Boniface's office, and there's kind of just a look inside of it. There's a little hallway there, and then a secondary office. This one will be more of a conference room style. Right now, Boniface is using that with his desk, but that's going to be a conference room. And attached to this conference room, there's a little hallway with indoor plumbing there, so there's a sink and a bathroom there. This is a side entrance door from the side of the building, so this would be as you're walking in on the left side of the sanctuary. You can see the black tile there. That's a cross in the floor of the sanctuary. Did everybody see that, or did anybody not see that? Okay. So that would be one side of the cross that goes into the sanctuary.
Has anyone ever been to Atlanta and saw the red clay? It's red clay.
Yeah, the dirt there was something. This is the part that's currently unfinished. This is going to be kind of a fellowship hall. You'll see here, okay? So back in the back there's going to be sinks and stoves. The week that we were there were just people jam-packed into this room sleeping overnight. I mean, they had 2 choirs from out of town come in for the conference. They had 1 team of evangelical preachers come in, and all these people didn't have, there's not like what we would consider hotels. So, I mean, they're all just jammed into this room. And then Friday night or Saturday, I can't remember, the high school students joined us as well. So they were jammed in there too. I mean, there was probably 100 people sleeping in this tiny little room all weekend. But these are just some pictures of where the sinks and the stoves will be. Long term. This is the exterior of the building. What I want you to really get off of this is understand the property line is the retaining wall. So the retaining wall is built on the property line. So as far as square footage, they used every bit of footprint that they had when they built this place. Here, there's about 3 feet between the retaining wall and the building, and you'll see on the other side it's more like 8 inches. I asked him, I said, is there any rules about how close to a property line you can build? He said, well, they really don't want your gutters pouring onto your neighbor's property because that causes erosion. But as long as your gutters pour on your own property, you're good. So this is just kind of a walk around the outside of the building. Right there, I didn't get a great picture of it. Back.
Well, there's a ladder right there.
Right there, kind of in front of Boniface, there's a water tower. Right underneath that is a water well that they had drilled and dug. And then everything, so we'll talk about how they get water later. It makes no sense to me. But what they do is they drill a well and then they pump it into a big storage tank, and then all of the water is gravity fed instead of pressurized into the house or into the building, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me if you got to have a pump to pump it into the tank. But a couple of people have mentioned, well, maybe it's not enough gallons per hour to keep up with running sinks and stuff. I don't know. So the pump can just run and keep filling that tank even if it has to run overnight or whatever. But that's what that kind of greenish, my laser pointer doesn't work on the TV, it automatically disappears, but kind of right here is the water tank there. This is the retaining wall. During the rainy season, they had built this retaining wall. You can see there's a hole in it. There's a big field up above, a cornfield, just up above that retaining wall. And during the rainy season, that retaining wall kind of caved in, and so that's on their list of things to do pretty quickly is repair that. He's going to reinforce it all with rebar to give it the extra strength needed to keep that from collapsing worse. Luckily, they only get rain during 2 seasons, and so the rain doesn't really, like, it's not going to continue to erode right now because they're in a dry season, which gives them some time to figure it out and get it taken care of. This is the restroom for everybody. Big don't recommend on that. This is city water. They have city water at the church, but their city water runs once a week for like 2 hours. It's super bizarre to think that you have city water available to you, but the city only turns the line on once a week for a couple hours. So it is there, it is available. Really what they do is they kind of just let it run on the ground, and it drains into their water table where their well is. And I mean, they'll use it if they're there and it's available or whatever, but for the most part they just leave it open so that it drains into their local water table, and then they can pump it out of their well and make use of it. So, and this is the other side where I said there's only about 8 inches, maybe a foot in between the building, and you can see there at the top their gutters are right where they're supposed to be, so that it doesn't drop on the neighbor's property.
That was a place I did not go.
So these are just going to be some pictures of the services that we were a part of, and I got to tell you, they may not have everything that we have, but one thing that they have that we don't is absolutely unencumbered ability to worship. I mean, they can worship in a way that I have personally never experienced. And I have been in a lot of different worship settings, but just to feel, it's loud. I mean, it's loud. To put it into perspective, on a Sunday morning, with all of your voices and the sound equipment, we're running between 75 and 80 decibels in this room. In that room, it was 100, just as their standard, which, if you don't have any idea of the science of sound, that's a massive increase. 100 decibels will deafen you pretty quickly. So it is loud to hear all these people just screaming and singing and worshiping God. It's really powerful. I told them, I said, listen, you need to send some missionaries over here to teach us folks how to worship, because they've got that on, and they do a great job. So these will just be some pictures of their worship team and different pictures of their worship services. I really loved the lighting. Those lights all change colors on the background. I really thought that was cool how they did that. This is what they call a choir. What we call a choir stands over here and sings in harmony. What they call a choir is a bunch of people dancing. So Winfield Choir, Just saying. Step up your game.
They're actually telling a story.
Yeah.
They're doing hand movements with the story they're telling.
There's a picture of me wearing the same shirt I am today. It's clean, I think. Some more choirs. I loved to
Cutie
see
pie.
the little kids just showing up. I mean, we're talking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and every single opportunity there were kids and mothers bringing their children. This was 9:30 at night, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm texting my wife, who is, I'm like getting ready to leave and get ready to go to bed, and this guy, he just reminded me of me, because I remember being 8 or 9 years old and the pastor's still going, and I'm out.
Ready for bed.
So we just sat and looked at each other, and he fell asleep, and it was hilarious. So I don't know how you fall asleep. It's so loud in that place, but just a few pictures of worship here. Again, if for no other reason, to go and experience one of their worship services, it would certainly change your life. Each time that we would get up to preach, there would always be an interpreter. So the way it works over there is 57 observed languages in Kenya. So that means that you could speak any one of 57 languages, which is a real challenge. And their national language was Swahili up until about 10 years ago, and then it changed to English. And so I only speak English, and for some of them, English is at the very least their second language, if not their third language. And so speaking through an interpreter is a very weird way to preach, because when I get going, I can't put the brakes on, and I got to say a phrase, and then I got to let him say the phrase, and he's trying to match your passion and inflection and everything. And in a minute, Pat, we're going to come to a picture of a couple of guys that we're interpreting.
Yeah, you have to get into the rhythm. That's what I call
Yeah.
the rhythm. And a couple times they had three up there, or well, two interpreters and then the speaker, and it's even a worse rhythm on three people
Yeah.
than it is.
So when I say that English is their second language, if not their third, they have what they call their mother tongue, which would be their original tribal language, and it's the reason they call it that is it's the language that their mom speaks. So that's what's spoken in the home, is the mother tongue. And then if you're of Pat's generation, when you went to school, you had your mother tongue, and then you'd have to learn Swahili, and now you have to learn English. And so the kids could speak English really well, because that's the way they talk in school, that's what's taught in school. The kids were really able to, but when we visited the seniors, I don't think any of them understood a word I was saying. I think it was just completely gone, because they would have spoke their mother tongue and maybe Swahili. So just a few more pictures. This is open air preaching. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they had what they called their Thanksgiving conference. And part of that, it started at 10 a.m. and it ended sometime, maybe 10 p.m. one night, midnight one night, 9 p.m. the next night, and then Sunday we were done around 5. They would break for dinner. And during that dinner break, they would take all their sound equipment and all their gear, and they would move it probably 3/4 of a mile, half mile up the road into the village or into the marketplace or whatever. And then they would have open air preaching, where they would just out in public be preaching the gospel. And this was really powerful for me, because it's one of the things that I wish I could do in America. And before I left, I was having a conversation with somebody who, he was in college to be a missionary, and he said, I just didn't want to be a missionary. I said, why? He said, well, there's too many people in America that need to hear the gospel. And I said, yeah, but in Kenya, they're willing to hear the gospel. And so it was so powerful to see that as they started preaching, people just would gather around, and it was a really, really powerful thing. So here is just a couple pictures of them preaching. This was my favorite part. Whoop, hang on. Nope, I might not have put it in. There it is. So this was my favorite part here, because it was really loud, right? They turned the volume as high as it'll go. because it was really loud, and so Pat and I are kind of like trying to communicate, but just, whatever. And I didn't realize Pat didn't understand what was going on, because I got it. I knew what was happening. Pat was lost in this moment.
The one guy turned to the other guy and go, "La, la, 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 la," and he'd go back, "La, la, la, la." So I thought they were yelling at each other, where one was interpreting for the other. I had no idea that was what was happening.
So Pat thought it was more of a play almost, where one guy was playing the bad side and there was like an argument going on. I understood that one guy was preaching in mother tongue, the other guy was interpreting in Swahili, and all I speak's English, so I don't know what they're saying, but I understood what was going on. So later that night at dinner, he asks Boniface's wife, Hilda, he asked her, "Hey, I saw this. Was that kind of a drama?" And I said, "No, Pat, they were preaching." And the other guy was interpreting. And it was just too funny. Hilda just thought that was the funniest thing, that we didn't realize what was going on. But that was really powerful. At the end of that, they gave this is a terrible picture, and I understand it's a terrible picture. But I didn't want to go into the most intimate of times and interrupt it, so I just took a picture from afar. But you can see in the background these young people that are kneeling down here. At the end of the open-air preaching, they gave an invitational to give your life to Christ. And I want to say Thursday night, there were 15 people that got saved. Friday night, there were 20, and I didn't count on Saturday night. But if you say on average 15 people per night that were giving their life to Christ, was just the most powerful thing to experience. I mean, I don't speak Swahili, I don't speak mother tongue, but I knew what was going on right then and there. And it was so powerful just to see kids you can see here, one of those kids is one of their high school students that they sponsor, right? Is a non-believer and dedicated their life to Christ that night and gave it over to him. Just so powerful to see that kind of stuff happening. So yeah, it was really, really awesome. Probably my favorite part. This old guy right here is Boniface's dad. Boniface's dad lives in the village where Boniface grew up, and it's the village that Boniface has a pretty heavy hand in. That's where the farm is. We'll see in a minute they drilled a well there. They're working on building basically a senior center. Boniface's dad is basically an elder in the village, if you will. Like, he kind of oversees the village. Now, I'm going to share with you what Boniface shared with me, and you can take it the way I took it. This dude has more than one wife, all right? This guy does not have only one wife. Not to say that he's been divorced several times. He actively and currently has at least two. Again, there was some breakdown in translation, but as Boniface was introducing his parents on Sunday, I saw 6 women stand up. So somewhere between 2 and 6 wives, which for us seems crazy. Like, that is almost like gross, I guess. But understand, this man wasn't saved. Boniface was not raised in a Christian home. Boniface got saved when he was in his late 20s. And so he didn't grow up in church and didn't understand. And the way the village and the politics, if you will, of the village works is the more wives you have, the more responsible you must be. So you're going to be either at one time when they had chiefs, you'd be a chief, or if now it's, you're just kind of an overseer of the village. Well, if he's got 6 wives, he must know how to run a household. He must know how to run a business. He's in charge. And so this guy has a lot going on. And for those of us who are pretty kind of like turned off to the idea of having 4 or 5 wives, I totally get that. It's not something that I'm in favor of. But what do you do when you're a non-believer and you're committed for life to 4 or 5 women, and then you become a believer? Do you just dump 4 or 5 women by the roadside and say, we don't want anything to do? Or what do you do? Well, I think you let God redeem your lifestyle before Christ, and you provide for them, and that's what he does. I mean, he's providing for not only his wives, but also his entire community around him, and he's living for the Lord now.
Well, I told him that in America, it's tough enough dealing and communicating with one woman, which I do badly. And I wouldn't really want to do that with 5 or 6 other women, that's for sure.
So, this was a trip to the village that we took. So this is their current water well system. I'll share with you about that in a minute. But getting to the village was an interesting journey, because he has a Chinese version of basically a Toyota Corolla, a tiny little four-door sedan, nothing special. And once you get out of the city, it's pretty immediate that what they call roads, we would call an ATV trail or a two-track or a tractor path.
Definitely. It's not even a dirt road.
They call them roads, but they're definitely not roads. I might have some pictures of the roads coming up here shortly. But this is, I think, 6 miles from the church. It took about 45 minutes to get there by car, not because of traffic, because the impassable roads were insane. And then we get within a half mile of the village, and the car starts making a real bad sound. And we had just filled up with fuel, and again, there's a language barrier thing, so I'm not getting involved, even though I'm relatively handy with vehicles. I'm just staying out of it. Pat says, well, what do you think happened? I said, well, I hope they didn't put diesel in this thing, because it sounded like a diesel. It was knocking bad.
It was knocking bad.
And then we stalled, and it just shut down. I didn't know at the time we were only about a half mile from the village. They must have put at least 10 gallons of water in this
10
thing.
gallons of water. And as they poured it in, it was like a volcano. This stuff was spitting. And I said to Josh, that engine's got to be toast. I can't imagine, as long as we were driving that thing,
No
with
water
no
in
water
it for almost an hour, and they just took the old 5-gallon buckets and just started pouring it to her. And what the problem was is his radiator cap had a bad seal on it, and so for who knows how long, I said to Pat, if I lived on the equator, you better believe I'd be checking my fluids every single day. That stuff's obviously
check your
gonna-
tire pressure, check your oil, check your water.
But his radiator cap had a leak in it, and so it had just all evaporated out and overheated terribly. And they got the water in, and away she went, and we kept on trucking. I couldn't believe it. But we made it to the village, and then this is a black water tank that's hooked in. That's a storage tank. The well pumps into that. And then the well also has a spigot off of it. So used to be, and again, this was just built this year. They didn't have a well until recently. So it used to be they'd have to walk a couple of miles to the river, dip for water, and then carry it home. Boniface says he estimates about 10,000 gallons of water per day that is taken out of this well to provide for that local village, which is an insane amount of water.
And it's about 140 foot, he said? It's a pretty deep well.
140 meters. It was over 300
okay.
feet, yeah. So it's a very deep well. You can drink right out of the spigot there, which for these people is huge.
We
very
probably could have
huge.
drank out of that spigot too.
Yeah, well. This here, you can see these concrete structures. Basically, that's where the aquifer underneath the ground sits. And so right now, they just have the pillars, and they want to build a structure there that provides more weight, I guess, that's going to help water production in the well. I don't know if that's how it works, but that's what he said. And that is going to be a building that they have in the long term for the seniors to live in. Right now, all of the senior citizens in the village either live with Boniface's dad or in a house right nearby. And when I say a house, I don't mean a house, but you'll see in a minute. So they live right there. So what the goal is to get this structure built, and it will provide 5 or 6 bedrooms for these elderly folks, which are probably in their 80s and 90s to live and be cared for. And then they're going to store water tanks on top of that.
You can see the corn laying on the ground. They've cut it.
So this is the farmland. I think the next couple of pictures will give you a pretty good view of the farm itself. Here is the base of that building. Here are the fields. They've already harvested most of the corn, and they plant it, I think, twice a year. So they'll go here in the next couple of months, and they'll start tilling it up to replant to harvest again in the fall or in the winter, our winter. This is one of the houses, and some more pictures just of the farmland here. I don't know why they don't have a tractor. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think, for me personally, if we were going to raise more money for these people, we should raise enough money to buy a tractor and enough money to buy a plane ticket to show them how to use a tractor, and send Bob out there to teach him how to run, a tractor.
Bob, you're a hero to them. Josh would talk about you and what you do.
Altogether, I think he's farming somewhere around 40 to 60 acres. And I said, well, I got a buddy in my church who farms, 80? He does 80 by himself, and he planted it all in about 2 days. So let's stop taking a whole month to plant a field. Let's take 2 days to plant the field and spend the rest of the month doing something more productive than putting corn in by hand. But this is all of their farmland. It's not all owned by one person. It's more of a co-op. That's one thing that is weird over there, is the culture. The culture is not a let's work together to advance ourselves. It is very much, I'm going to work to advance myself. So if I have a field, it may only be a 5-acre field. I'm not going to let anybody else plant my field. I'm not going to let anybody else harvest my field. I'm going to do everything on my field, and anything in profit that I can make, I'm going to take and I'm going to apply to me, which sounds okay, except for the fact that if I take my 5-acre field and work with my neighbor and his 5-acre field, and the 5 of us come together, we could plow all these fields right now, we could harvest all these fields right now, and we would all, if we split it evenly, come out with a lot more profit. So the fact that Boniface and his dad have worked with these locals to say, okay, let's do all of this together and kind of developed a cooperative of the farms is a really big deal in this community, because it's not normal. From the highest presidential powers of leadership in Kenya all the way down to the base level, the peasants, everybody is in it for me. I'm going to do what I have to do to survive, to get ahead, and to make my life better. It is not a community-based world over there. It's just absolutely not. And so it's very bizarre and outside of the ordinary to be working together like this. And so
it does have solar power that runs the pump.
Yeah, there's a solar panel running the pump for the well. But again, this is one of the oxen, bulls, I don't know. This is one of the cows that they bought this year. Here's another one. These are the 2 animals that they plow these fields with. And I know I'm a great photographer, so to look at that, it kind of just looks like a normal cow, but that thing, its head might come up to my hip. I mean, this thing is like real small. It is not a big animal, and it's about 13 years old, which to them is fresh. He said it takes 7 years for him to get to maturity, and then 4 or 5 years to train him to pull a plow. And I was like, man, a John Deere does what I tell it to do day one. I don't know what you're doing with these bulls.
They're free range grazing.
Yeah.
They don't feed them corn, anything like that.
Yeah. So they buy a new set of bulls about every 3 years, and yeah, they got to get a tractor so bad. Now this is where Boniface's dad lives, and these are 2 houses nearby where some of the senior folks also live. And we'll take this. This is a mud hut. I mean, that's what it is. That's which is so crazy, because again, we're 6 miles from the city. I mean, the distance between here and Dover, essentially, and that's the difference between Boniface's house and this. In that short of a distance. Now again, it's a 45-minute drive by car because it's crazy roads, but it's 10 kilometers, he said, which is about 6.5 miles. So crazy to see how quickly the culture changes in such a short distance.
The stones around the building, that's what they got from the road.
And so here is a newer one, right? That is a mud hut on the inside, and then they've skim-coated it with a plaster on the outside. Boniface's parents here, and then this is the group of senior citizens. We were able to go, and they needed blankets, so we were able to go and pass out blankets to the senior community in Boniface's childhood village. One of these, the way everybody wanted to say thank you was by singing and dancing, and so one of these here in a second, there's a video of them singing to us, so here you go. Oh, no. Can you go to the auxiliary page and unmute the computer? If you don't know what I'm talking about, I can do it, but I need the device.
If you notice
You
the
good?
colors once again in their clothes, it's just
Here we go.
brilliant colors they love.
So that was Boniface in the purple there, if you didn't know who he was, but that was him. One thing that I wanted to point out, these people don't understand how a camera works. They think if you're holding a camera, it's always taking video, and then they don't understand how quickly it can take a photograph. And so they expect that you're just video recording, and I'm like, and Boniface was like, did you record that? And I was like, no. What? You didn't even tell, they just started singing. I didn't record. Well, you had to do it again. Okay. So then we'd record it, and then they'd want you to, they want their picture taken, right? They think it's the coolest thing to have their picture taken. And so they're standing there giving you the thumbs up, and it's like, I took the picture 5 minutes ago. Can we move through the line a little bit quicker? So it was interesting just to see that. This guy, his name is Moses, which I think is a cool name, first of all. But Moses is a doctor and a pharmacist. So he has his pharmacy degree. And what Moses does is he works with Boniface in this pharmacy here. So this is his staff of 2 that he currently has. They have a long-term vision that I'll explain to you in a minute. But really, this is it. That's the pharmacy. There's 3 walls there with drugs on them. And what they do is they sell the drugs as a for-profit business, right, as a pharmacy. And this is very atypical, but Moses here, who owns the business, he takes the profits from the business and reinvests them into free medication for the underprivileged and the people who live in the villages. And so Boniface's dad is the only one with a phone in the village, and it's not a phone like you and I have. It's as basic as they come. And when somebody is sick or hurt or needs medication or whatever, we'll send Boniface a text or a phone call and say, hey, we need this anti-malarial, this anti-typhoid, or whatever it is. And then Moses here will issue the prescription to that person, and Boniface will navigate his way by motorcycle or car or whatever, get it to the village, and make sure that these people are provided for. The long-term goal with this, they would like to open a actual treatment facility because he's the only game in town when it comes to helping people. I tried to explain earlier that nobody wants to help anybody over there. And so everybody knows that Moses will take care of you for free if you don't have the money, if you don't have insurance and you can't get. And so he told us the day before we visited him, I think it would have been Thursday, that somebody showed up on his doorstep with a gunshot wound and asked him to treat his gunshot wound. And he's trained as an EMT and he has medic experience. And he said, well, I can stop the bleeding, but I'm not a surgical facility or anything, and had to send him to the hospital. And their long-term goal is that they'd like to have a facility with a full-time nursing staff, a full-time physician staff, so that they can provide that treatment for free. They can provide treatment to people who have insurance and take the profit from the insurance to provide for those who have nothing. And so that's kind of a long-term goal that they're working towards. But right now, a lot of the money that comes in goes right to this ministry here to pay for drugs, to get people the vaccines and the anti-malarials and the different medications that they need, because for whatever reason, they don't understand you got to boil your water so that you don't get sick. You got to watch out for certain wildlife and mosquitoes and different things to keep you from getting sick. They don't understand the preventative steps, and so they wait until they get infected, and then they need the medication, and that's what they're providing through this ministry.
Well, I think HIV is a biggie too.
HIV is huge over there, which is another thing. I had sat down with another gentleman there who was a medical doctor, and I said, why is that still a thing? Are you at least educating? And he's like, well, we educate them, but it's like they don't want to receive information, right? They don't believe you when you tell them something. I never heard that before. I can't fathom that. It must not be true. And there's no way to prove to them, like with the HIV and stuff, there's no way to prove to them that, hey, this is how you get it, so don't do this and you won't get it. There's no way to prove that. And because they have done things a certain way for so long, it's almost impossible to get them to really change that. And so all they can do is preventatively treat it. This was Sunday of last week. This was the actual building dedication service. I can't express this enough. When you go to Kenya, please understand, time is absolutely irrelevant. It is not a thing. They don't pay attention to clock. I'm not a slave to a schedule, but I use time as a tool for punctuality, for planning, for making sure things are getting done in an effective order and manner. Time is completely irrelevant to these people. So Sunday morning or Saturday night before bed, Boniface, okay, we got a lot going on Sunday. There's a lot of people coming. It's a big service. It's a big ceremony. We have to be at the church at 10 a.m. sharp. And I said, great. And I thought to myself, not a chance, but I'll be ready. So I'm ready, sitting on the couch, 9:30. Me and Pat are just sitting there.
Yeah, we were up by 8 and things ready. And
at 10:30, Boniface comes walking out, and he's like, we're late. And I'm like, we're not late, bro. We're absent. Like, you have not shown up officially at this point. 30 minutes is not late. 30 minutes is you didn't show. So I said to Pat, there's got to be 200 people waiting on us out there. And sure enough, when we pulled in,
there was at least 200 people.
This is what we come upon, just because they had the door locked with a ribbon, because they had to do a ribbon cutting ceremony on the grand opening. This gentleman right here, he's in his 80s. He's a national level bishop with PIFA. So he is one of the first members to translate the Bible into many of the Kenyan tongues. He's been serving God for over 60 years. One of the most prominent members in their church community. Boniface wanted me to cut the ribbon. I said, I'm not about that. So he honored this gentleman. And I don't really want to talk about the guy, but I'll tell you, this guy here, his name's Dave. He was a piece of work, but we'll get into that in a minute. So you can see this bishop here, who he's sitting in that big throne. Pat's is just to the right of it.
Mine's just to the right here.
They gave me a metal chair at least. That was my seat in between the two of them. There's Pat's throne. These are just some preachers here in the red suits. Some preachers from the local community or from the denomination that they're affiliated with. There's Boniface, and that gentleman there was one of the evangelists that was there all week. He's also a medical doctor. And then just some pictures of everybody who showed up. This is one of the choirs that they had come for the Sunday service. These are the high school kids that Boniface sponsors through his church that came up, and they sang a song. The only thing I remember they said when they were done is "be blessed," and I really appreciated that. So, and then another one of their choirs here. This was a picture from above, just so you can see how many people showed up for the Sunday morning service that day. I mean, it was packed. There were several hundred people there. It was really an awesome experience. And then as we concluded the service, they wanted to honor us, which I am thankful for. So first they honored Pat. Oh, wait, no, this is Pat introducing me. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the guy comes up to me and says, we want you to speak. I says, well, I don't speak, Josh speaks. But what he wanted me to do was introduce Josh. That's big, to introduce people. So I get up there and I start talking. I can do that. And then I'm done, and he leans over and he says, are you going to introduce Josh, the pastor? I went, oh, yeah, that's what I did.
And then while I was preaching, everybody wanted to take pictures of me, so I told them I wanted to take a picture of them. This is the gift. I was so thankful for this beautiful gift. They don't have anything. And so what they do have is talent and skills. And so there were supposed to be 3 of us that went. And so for each of us, they took our photo that was on the banner and they painted a portrait in our likeness. So as you can see, that is Pat holding his portrait. It's beautiful.
Now, Josh took my picture here, and he didn't know that they were going to do
I
this.
had no idea what was going on.
And I look really, really bad, and I really look bad. But actually, the artist got my essence, because I feel like that every day.
So I would say of the portraits, mine turned out the best. Pat's was the second best, but my favorite by far is Greg's. So we'll get there. This is mine. I can show it to you because I have it here this morning. Didn't they do a good job on that?
They did an excellent job. It was.
It looks just like me.
It does.
Right?
It does.
This artist, he knew what he was doing. So that's mine. Greg, if you could come up, I'd love to present you with yours now. Come on down. Somebody make sure you get a picture of
Yeah.
Greg holding his image.
I said, "Who's that?"
Somebody take a picture of this for Melissa because she's going to miss it if you don't. But they didn't know you weren't coming. So this is your picture that they painted of you. They're not way out in left field. But
They're not. They're not.
We're going to hang this up in the office at your local business so that people know. But that's for you to keep, just by way of saying thank you.
I mean, I see parts of him in there.
It's a little more abstract, for sure.
No, I think mine's more abstract.
I lost my clicker now. I got it. And then they presented us with a flag. This was really big for Boniface, and that's why I have the Kenyan flag here this morning. This is really important to him to show kind of a national coming together, that people from the United States wanted to help people from Kenya. He wanted me to give him an American flag, but when he was rushing out the door on time, he left the American flag at the house, so I wasn't able to present him with a flag.
They kept on wanting to turn this flag upside down, and I'm saying,
Yeah.
no, the spears go up. Here's a guy from America trying to tell him how they shad the flag.
So, yeah, it was a real awesome opportunity. There's Greg's beautiful picture. And then everybody wanted a picture with us at the end. And so these are just some photos of the end of the service. This guy, his name, Victor. His name was Victor. That was Boniface's cousin. Victor, and I told you about Dave a minute ago. Victor owns his own business. He does solar panels. He works out in Nairobi. He's a very successful businessman. We had dinner with Victor the night before, and Victor failed to mention that he is also a politician. I didn't realize that he was.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Okay, so Victor was a politician, and he was running for a seat in 2027. And all week we'd been there. Boniface was saying he's so thankful that a church in the United States helped him build his church, because normally the way a church would get built is a politician would come in and help raise the money to build the church, but now that politician has an awful lot of say as to what goes on in that church, and during campaigns and different things, they get to come in and be really political, and Boniface hates that. And he said, I'm never going to let a politician speak in my church. It's just never going to happen. It's not going to happen. Well, Victor is his cousin. And they're really big on introducing, like Pat said. If you've got a visitor, they want to say, oh, my mom's here, my dad's here, Bishop so-and-so's here, my cousin's here. So he introduced Victor and allowed Victor to speak as his cousin. However, I'm positive that he told Victor, keep the politics out of it. You're not allowed to speak on politics. So Victor shared something out of the Word of God, and it was pretty awesome. And then he says, and I know I'm not supposed to do this, but in 2027, I'm going to be on the ballot, ... And Boniface locked eyes with me in that moment, because I thought, you said no politicians. So anyway, that ended, and then shortly after that, Boniface's friend, who was the guy that drove us to and from the airport and hung out with us over the weekend, his name was Nation, was sitting beside Dave. And Dave is another local politician who had been invited. But Dave was not going to be given the microphone. But Dave communicated to Boniface's friend that if he didn't get a microphone in his hand, he was going to be so overwhelmed that he would pass out. And he was shaking because of the amount of dishonor that he, as a elected official, was not getting. And I thought that was pretty bizarre. But so Boniface caved, and he said, "Oh, I'd like to introduce this guy. His name's Dave." Well, Dave is a local politician. He's not like Victor. He's up there in the government. He's running for offices that are a little higher up. So that's a little more honorable. That's fine. If you want to just shortly say, "Hey, vote for me in 27," that's fine. Dave would be like running for town council, right, in Dover. And Dave signs his name, the Honorable Dave so-and-so, real big. There was a guest book, and Boniface wanted us to sign the guest book first. We didn't, and so the guys who think they're important will sign an entire sheet in the guest book. So I went to the important guy's page, and I signed right above his name on the first slot to let him know that I was here first. So anyway, Dave gets up and he says, "Well, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I want to tell you I'm going to be on the ballot in 2027, blah, 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 blah." And so as Boniface was giving us our paintings and the flag, he said, "Do you have anything else to say?" And I said, "Yeah, I got one more thing to say." I said, "In 2027, I'm going to be on the ballot, and I'd like you to vote for me." Well, Victor thought that was hilarious. Dave, not so much. He was not impressed. So anyway, I said that, and I handed the microphone back to Boniface. He said, "That's all you got to say?" I said, "Yeah, I said the rest of it while I was preaching. What else do you want me to say?" So just a great time. The kids, they really loved getting their pictures taken, and it was just fun to hang out with some of the kids. Obviously, Pat is a big old softy and loves kids. So that's where we're going to head next, is the children. So we were blessed with the opportunity to go out to the local schools, where this is the boarding school where also grazing cattle in the road. But this is the boarding school where the high school kids go. Boniface sponsors 36 children through his church to go to boarding school. It's $63 a month, $65 a month to sponsor a kid to go to boarding school. And I would recommend, I'm going to show you individually. These are just some kids from the school. That's the school's water system. Some more of the kids from the school. This is the primary school.
They wanted their picture taken, but they didn't, and I go like this, and then I'd go and take it, and then they wanted to see the picture,
So this is the primary school. The primary school functions as an orphanage as well. So it's a boarding school that you can send your kids to and put them up, but it's also an orphanage. So that helps with Boniface's workload because he doesn't have to have all of the little ones in his house as well. But he is involved with the orphanage. He's involved with the primary school, and they sponsor some of the kids that go to the primary school. These are just some of the living quarters, and these are the kids that are at the primary school. We were able to hand out just basic office supplies, pens and pencils, to these kids, and that was something that they thought was just so neat that they had pens and pencils. They were excited to hang out and spend time with us, and so great opportunity to fellowship and worship with them and give them their stuff. Oh, you muted me again.
The camera does put 10, 15 pounds on you, doesn't it?
Sure it does, bud. So this is just a couple more pictures of the kids, and this is them singing thank you to us.
The white guy can't keep beat with the...
So this is, again, the primary kids. They're not the older kids, but this is the group specifically that Boniface, through his church, sponsors to be there. He pays their room and board. He pays their tuition off of the church budget, which is honestly not even something I don't think we could do here, is pay a kid's room and board at the level that he's doing it. Just a huge, huge thing. Individually, I took pictures of every one of the high school students, and I've put together prayer cards with their names, ages, and birthdays on them. If you would like, or if you could, I would love to have somebody or whomever come up and take one of these and just pray for them individually, specifically. Some of them don't know Jesus. Some of them are not Christians. Some of them are. 18 of the 36 are total orphans. They don't have a mom or a dad. They were either abandoned or they were left at the church, or their mom and dad have passed away. Of these kids, 18 of them are total orphans. The other 18 come from single mother homes with multiple children and extreme poverty. And so all of them need support. Now, within our purpose and mission here at Winfield, I don't want to sponsor Boniface full time. I don't think that we need to send him a check every single month. I think helping him with big projects is important, and I'd love to continue to develop a relationship. But one thing that we can do, that you can do as an individual, that would help his ministry with finances, is you can adopt one of these kids. If a lot of you probably have heard of or even sponsored Compassion Children, very much the same idea, only way better. I have a Compassion kid, and to meet my Compassion kid is an awful lot of logistics. If you sponsor one of these children and you want to meet them, you get on a plane, you go over there, and you go see them. Period. That's it. To go with Compassion and try and meet your Compassion child, you got to jump through way more hoops, and tracking down your kid is going to be way more difficult. If you want to communicate with these kids, you write a letter, you send it to Boniface, Boniface hands it to the child. So it's a much more one-on-one personal relationship that we can be building with these kids, and we can have a much bigger impact in their life. Now, specifically, I've printed off just the high school students, because those are the ones that don't get help. Those are the ones who've been left in the system for so long, they're just trying to make their way through. And they're the ones that it's going to be the most challenging to find help for. So I would seriously recommend, at the very least, take one of these pieces of paper and be praying for these individuals by name, and pray about whether or not it's somebody you can sponsor. Because for $65 a month, you're paying for their tuition, you're paying for their housing, you're paying for their food, you're paying for their clothes. And if you have a personal desire to develop a relationship with them, they graduate high school, you can be their host family to bring them to America. Or you want to go out there for their high school graduation, you can do that. That's a service that Compassion doesn't offer. And so it's a little bit more than Compassion, but it's really a much better investment, in my opinion. And again, all of this, Boniface is already paying, right? So he's already paying the $65 a month for these kids. So not only does it help the kids, but it helps his local church ministry as well, because it alleviates some of the financial burden within that local church. And they don't have, Pat, I don't know why, was going over the books with Boniface. He was like doing some accounting. I walked up in the office and the ledger's out, and I'm like, you keeping them honest, Pat? Great. But Pat could attest to how little they have to give, and they're giving in spite of the fact that they don't have anything to give.
Yeah, he opened the books. He's willing to open the book, and you can look at his electric bill for that church is $80 a month. And I would say to myself, that's a pretty good deal. Well, not for over there. It's expensive.
Yeah. So, again, this is just some pictures from the high school. Some of the kids that wanted their pictures, everybody wanted their picture with Pat. I don't
Big
like...
white guy they wanted to get a picture with.
And then these are the 5 kids that Magori Missions currently sponsors. Okay, so Magori Missions is the local agency here in New Philadelphia, Ohio, that sponsors different things for Boniface and his ministry. And so there's a local organization here in Ohio that helps. So these 5 kids are already actively sponsored through the organization Magori Missions. And then this, that was the last one, I guess. This picture here is all of the kids together. And so when you kind of work that out, 5 of them are actively being sponsored. That leaves 31 of them still available to sponsor. So I wanted to end with that because I think that that's the most important part for us, that we can actively tomorrow be involved in. We can change a kid's life tomorrow just by spending $65 a month. And maybe $65 a month is a lot to you, and I don't want to devalue that, but when you figure, I don't know, I have a 4-year-old and he already costs me way more than $65 a month. So when you figure you're providing a life for these kids, every one of them I interviewed and I asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there were about 3 total answers. I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a journalist. They all have huge aspirations to go on to bigger and better things. And that's huge for a culture where nobody desires to be bigger and better, right? It's normal for us in America to say, oh yeah, I can be anything because that's the American dream. And that's not normal for these kids over there, especially not for orphans. As an orphan over there, you get to grow up and live if you're lucky. And so to have an orphan come to me and say, I want to be a neurosurgeon, that's a lofty goal, brother. Set the bar high, I guess. That's a big deal for him to even be willing to say that that's what he wants to do, because his goals are high rather than what they would be had he not come into contact with Church of the Living God or with Boniface or any of the ministries. And so, again, I'll leave these up here. I have 2 piles. One of them is just loose leaf paper. If you're not interested in sponsoring them, please take some of the loose paper and take a kid and pray for him every day by name. God works through our prayers. If you do want to sponsor somebody, I have a little bit harder cardstock, more durable things I can hand out to you, and I can explain the process of how that would look if you're interested in sponsoring some of these kids. But I think it's definitely something that we can do, and definitely a way we can impact. We are way over time. That's all I've got. If you have questions and you want more information, you are welcome to hang out during our Sunday school hour. Ask those questions, and me will answer them, because Pat's going to go teach our middle school age kids. But I will gladly answer any questions that you have. So let's, worship team, I'm going to pray. We're going to be done. Let's close in prayer, and then we'll quickly move into our Sunday school hour. Father, we're just so thankful for the opportunity to have gone over there, to have worshiped together and united together with brothers and sisters that we didn't even know a year ago existed. But what an encouraging thing it is to show up to a strange place, a strange environment, and be able to, in unity, worship you with other people. God, we're just so thankful for everything that you have done, using us here at Winfield to make an impact abroad, but also everything that you're doing over there, the powerful works that you're working over there. God, we just pray that you would continue to use us, and that we could continue to partner with Church of the Living God in Magori as we move forward. We pray all this